The coffee was bitter, the way he liked it. Jack sat in the corner booth of the roadside diner, a place that smelled of stale grease and pine-scented cleaner. It was a liminal space, a pause button on a long, lonely highway, stretching across the flatlands of nowhere. His Harley, a beast of chrome and black leather, was parked just outside the window, its engine still radiating a phantom warmth in the cooling dusk. He was just passing through, another nameless rider on a road to somewhere else. Then he saw her. She was the waitress, maybe 19 or 20, with tired eyes and a name tag that read Lena. Her movements were efficient, born of habit, but there was a tremor in her hands as she refilled a trucker's water glass. A subtle, almost imperceptible shake. Most people wouldn't notice. Most people weren't looking. But Jax had spent years on the road, and the road teaches you to watch the edges of things. It teaches you that survival is a quiet art of observation. Lena kept glancing towards the parking lot, not at his bike, but past it, at a plain white work van parked in the shadows at the far end of the lot. It was nondescript, the kind of vehicle designed to be forgotten the moment you look away. No company logo, no markings, just a coat of road dust and a pair of dark, unreadable windows. He watched her wipe down the counter, her gaze flicking to the van. He watched her take an order, her smile strained, her eyes darting back to the van. It was a rhythm, a nervous, frantic beat beneath the calm surface of her work. He felt the low thrum of it in his own chest, a familiar signal. Something was wrong. His coffee was getting cold. He should have paid his bill and left 10 minutes ago, continuing his ride into the deep blue of twilight. But he stayed. He ordered a slice of apple pie he didn't want, just to buy more time. He needed to understand the rhythm. The van was a predator, sitting perfectly still, waiting. Two figures were visible inside, silhouettes against the dying light. They weren't eating, they weren't talking on the phone. They were just watching the diner. Watching her. Lena approached his table with the pie. "Anything else for you?" she asked, her voice a little too bright. He looked from her face to the van and back again. "You all right?" The question was quiet, not meant for anyone else to hear. Her composure fractured for a split second. A flicker of raw fear crossed her eyes before being quickly shuttered. "I'm fine," she said, the words brittle. She placed the pie on the table, her hands shaking so much a dollop of whipped cream slid off the slice. She didn't seem to notice. Her eyes were already back on the van. He knew that look. He'd seen it in the eyes of a cornered animal. He took a slow bite of the pie, the taste of cinnamon and apples turning to ash in his mouth. The sun had dipped below the horizon now, and the parking lot lights flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows. The van remained, a hulking white shape in the gloom. Have you ever had that feeling? That deep, primal hum in your gut that tells you the world is tilted on its axis, even if just for a moment? It's a whisper from a part of you that sees more than your eyes do. Don't ever ignore it. If this story reminds you of anything, let it be that. Hit that like button if you believe in trusting your gut, and let's see how many of us listen to that quiet voice. The clock on the wall ticked towards 9. Closing time. Jax watched the cook shut down the grill while Lena wiped the last of the tables. The trucker from earlier had already rumbled away in his rig. An elderly couple paid their bill and shuffled out into the night. Soon it was just Jax, Lena, and her boss, a tired-looking man counting receipts behind the counter. And the van. The moment Lena untied her apron, the van's engine turned over. The sound was soft, but in the quiet diner, it was as loud as a gunshot. It wasn't a coincidence. The timing was too precise, too patient. Jax felt the muscles in his back and shoulders tighten. This was a hunt, and the prey was about to leave the safety of the herd. "Car's in the shop again, Mr. Henderson," Lena said to her boss, her voice thin. "I'll be walking tonight." Mr. Henderson grunted, not looking up from his stack of bills. "All right, Lena. See you tomorrow. Don't forget to lock the door on your way out." He was oblivious. He didn't see the tremor in her hands or the way her gaze was fixed on the parking lot. He didn't hear the engine that started at the exact moment she was free to leave. He just saw a waitress at the end of her shift. Jack stood up, the legs of his chair scraping against the linoleum floor. He dropped a 20 on the table, more than enough for the pie and coffee. He walked toward the door, his boots making a heavy, deliberate sound. He could feel Lena's eyes on him. She was probably wondering if he was another threat, another shadow in her already dark evening. He pushed the door open, letting in a blast of cold night air. The van's headlights were on now, two stark white beams cutting through the darkness, aimed directly at the diner's entrance. They weren't trying to be subtle anymore. Jax didn't walk to his bike. Not yet. He stood on the curb just outside the door and lit a cigarette. He took a long, slow drag, his eyes locked on the van. He was making himself a problem, a witness, a complication in their clean, simple plan. The door opened behind him. It was Lena. She froze when she saw him standing there, a dark figure wreathed in smoke. Then her eyes went to the van, and a small, choked sound escaped her throat. She understood. He wasn't another threat. He was the only thing standing in the way. The van inched forward, its tires crunching softly on the gravel. It was a shark gliding through water, all silent menace and lethal intent. Jax took another drag from his cigarette, then dropped it to the ground, crushing it under his heel. The small orange glow died. He turned to her. Her face was pale in the harsh glare of the headlights, her eyes wide with a terror so profound it seemed to steal the air from her lungs. "They waiting for you?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. She couldn't speak. She just nodded, a tiny jerky movement. A single tear traced a path through the dust on her cheek. "Get behind me," he said. It wasn't a request. He moved then, positioning himself directly between her and the van. He was a wall of black leather and solid muscle. He unzipped his jacket slightly, a small, calculated movement, a signal. He stared into the windshield of the van, trying to pierce the glare, to see the faces of the men who hunted children in the dark. The van stopped, maybe 30 feet away. The passenger side window slid down with a quiet hum. A man's head leaned out. He was bland, average, the kind of face you'd forget instantly. That was the most terrifying thing about him. "Problem here?" the man asked. His voice was calm, reasonable, like he was asking for directions. Jax ignored him. He kept his focus on Lena, who was trembling behind him. "My bike's faster than their van," he said to her, his voice steady. "When I tell you to, you get on. Don't think, just move. You understand?" She gave another small nod, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "She's with us," the man in the van called out, a harder edge to his voice now. "Family friend, just giving her a ride home." The lie was so smooth, so practiced. Jax felt a cold fury rise in him. He finally turned his head, just enough to meet the man's gaze. "She doesn't look like she wants a ride." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken violence. The engine of the van hummed. The night air was still. For a moment, nothing moved. It was a standoff in a forgotten parking lot, a battle of wills between a predator and an obstacle. Then the van's side door began to slide open. That was the signal. The moment the game changed. "Now!" Jax barked. He didn't wait to see her reaction. He spun around, grabbed his keys from his pocket, and swung his leg over his bike in one fluid motion. He felt Lena scramble behind him, her small, cold hands grabbing onto his jacket. He thumbed the ignition. The Harley roared to life, a sudden, violent explosion of sound that shattered the night's quiet. It was a declaration, a challenge. He revved the engine, the sound echoing off the diner walls. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a large figure stepping out of the van's side door. They were too slow. He twisted the throttle, and the bike lurched forward, tires spitting gravel. Lena cried out, her arms wrapping tightly around his waist as they accelerated out of the parking lot and onto the dark, empty highway. He glanced in his mirror. The van was pulling out, its headlights swinging wildly as it tried to follow. The chase was on. He pushed the bike, the engine screaming as the speedometer climbed. 80, 90, 100. The world dissolved into a blur of streaking white lines and dark trees. Lena was pressed against his back, her face buried in his jacket, her body shaking with a mixture of terror and adrenaline. The van was powerful, but it was a brick. On the straightaways, it kept pace, its headlights a constant, menacing presence in his mirrors. But Jax knew these back roads. He'd spent a lifetime learning the twists and turns of forgotten asphalt. He took a hard right onto a narrow county road, the bike leaning so far over the foot pegs scraped against the ground, sending up a shower of sparks. The van tried to follow, its tires squealing in protest, but its bulk worked against it. It couldn't take the turn that fast. For a few precious seconds, its headlights disappeared from his mirror. He didn't slow down. He pushed harder, taking another sharp turn, then another. weaving a path through the dark countryside that a heavy van could never hope to match. He drove for another 10 minutes, his senses on high alert, checking his mirrors constantly. Nothing. The twin lights were gone. They had lost them. Only then did he allow himself to ease back on the throttle. The roar of the engine settled into a more manageable rumble. The wind was cold against his face, but he could feel the frantic, terrified heartbeat of the girl behind him starting to slow. He didn't take her home. He didn't even ask where she lived. Taking her home would be leading the wolves right to her door. There was only one place to go. He pulled into the brightly lit parking lot of the county sheriff's department. The building was small, made of brick, with a single American flag flapping under a spotlight. He cut the engine, and the sudden silence was deafening. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Lena's arms were still locked around his waist, her grip like iron. "We're safe," he said softly. Her grip loosened. A shudder ran through her entire body, and then she began to sob. Not loud, hysterical cries, but deep, ragged, gut-wrenching sobs of someone who had been holding back unimaginable fear and had finally broken. He sat there, a statue of leather and steel, and let her cry. He didn't offer empty platitudes or awkward pats on the back. He just gave her the silence and the safety to let it all out. He understood that sometimes the greatest kindness is to simply be a steady presence in the storm. After a few minutes, her sobs subsided into shaky breaths. I thought I was going to die," she whispered, her voice raw. "You're not," he said, the words a simple, solid fact. "Come on, let's go inside." He helped her off the bike. Her legs were unsteady and she stumbled, leaning against him for support. He put a steadying arm around her and walked her towards the glass doors of the station. The deputy at the front desk looked up, his expression a mixture of boredom and surprise. A hulking biker and a crying young woman walking in at 10 o'clock at night was not his usual Tuesday. "We need to report something," Jack said, his voice flat and serious. "Attempted abduction." The deputy's boredom vanished. He was on his feet in an instant, ushering them into a small, sterile office. A few minutes later, another man entered. He was older, with a weathered face, a thick mustache, and the tired, cynical eyes of a man who had seen too much. His name tag read Sergeant Miller. Miller looked Jax up and down, his gaze lingering on the club patches on his jacket. There was an immediate, palpable wall of skepticism. To him, Jax was probably just as much a part of the problem as whatever he was reporting. "All right," Miller said, his voice a low growl. "Talk." Jax let Lena tell the story first. He watched as the sergeant listened, his expression unchanging, his eyes hard. He could see the doubt there. A nervous girl, a vague story about a white van. It could be anything. A misunderstanding. A lover's quarrel. But then Lena mentioned the timing. How the van's engine started the exact moment she untied her apron. How the headlights came on the second she stepped outside. She described the driver's calm, predatory voice. Miller's expression shifted slightly. A flicker of interest. He turned his gaze to Jax. "And you? What's your part in this?" "I was having pie," Jax said simply. "I saw them watching her. I saw her watching them. It felt wrong." He described the van. The out-of-state plates, partially obscured by mud. He gave Miller the partial plate number he'd managed to catch. 3 letters, 4 numbers. First 2 were K, Z. Last number was a 9. The mud covered the rest. He described the way the side door opened, not with a question, but with an intent to act. He didn't embellish. He just stated the facts as he had observed them. Cold, hard, and precise. Miller stared at him, his cynical eyes searching Jax's face for a lie, for a hole in the story. He found none. The biker wasn't emotional. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was a witness, reporting what he saw with a chilling clarity. The sergeant picked up the phone on his desk. "Get me a bolo on a white work van, no markings," he said into the receiver. "Partial plate, Kansas or Kentucky, starts with KZ, ends in 9. 2 male occupants. Possible connection to attempted abduction. Consider them armed and dangerous." He hung up the phone and looked at them both. The wall of skepticism was gone, replaced by a grim professionalism. "You did good," he said, his eyes on Jax. "Most people would have just finished their pie and driven away." Jax simply nodded. He hadn't done it to be a hero. He had done it because the alternative, the image of that girl's terrified face as the van door slid open, was not something he could live with. They waited at the station for hours. Lena's parents arrived, a frantic, tearful couple who enveloped their daughter in hugs and then turned to Jax with eyes full of a gratitude so immense it was humbling. Her father, a simple man with calloused hands, shook Jack's hand and couldn't speak, his throat thick with emotion. Jack stayed until he was sure she was safe, until he had given his full statement and answered every one of Miller's questions. As he was finally getting ready to leave, just before dawn, Miller walked him out to his bike. The air was cold and clean. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east. "We got a hit," Miller said quietly. "Van was flagged in a similar incident 3 states over. A girl went missing from a bus stop 2 weeks ago. They think it's them." Jax felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. He had been right. His gut had been right. "You saved her life tonight, you know that," Miller said, clapping a heavy hand on Jax's shoulder. "These guys, they don't make mistakes. They're professionals. You were a mistake they didn't plan for." Jax looked at the grizzled old cop. He saw the weariness in his eyes, but also a deep, abiding respect. An understanding had passed between them. They were 2 different kinds of men from 2 different worlds, but they both recognized the line between right and wrong. "Just saw something that was wrong," Jax said, shrugging. "Yeah, well," Miller grunted, "not enough people do. Or if they do, they don't do a damn thing about it. You ever need anything, you call me." He handed Jax a card with his personal cell number on it. It was a gesture of profound trust, an invitation into a world Jax had always existed on the fringes of. He nodded, pocketed the card, and got on his bike. He started the engine, the familiar roar a comfort in the quiet morning. As he pulled out of the parking lot, he saw Sergeant Miller in his rearview mirror, watching him go. He wasn't just a biker anymore. He was the man who had seen something. The years that followed were a long, slow epilogue to that one night. The men in the van were caught 2 days later, trying to cross the state line. The partial plate number Jax had provided was the key. When the police searched their van, they found evidence linking them not just to the disappearance of the girl from the bus stop, but to a string of abductions across 5 states over 3 years. They were predators of the worst kind, methodical and patient, preying on young women in small, forgotten towns. They were sentenced to life in prison, and their capture meant that dozens of future victims would get to live their lives, blissfully unaware of the fate they had narrowly escaped. All because one man in a diner decided to order a slice of pie he didn't want. Lena went to college. She studied psychology and then went to law school. Today, she works as a victim's advocate, a fierce, compassionate voice for those who have had their own voices stolen. She uses her story, the story of that terrifying night, to empower others, to teach them to be aware, to listen to their own instincts. She is no longer a victim, she is a warrior. Every year on the anniversary of that night, a postcard arrives in Jax's P.O. box, no matter where in the country he is. The picture is always different. A mountain range, a cityscape, a quiet beach, but the message is always the same. "Thank you for seeing me." Jax never went back to being a drifter. That night changed him too. He found a purpose beyond the endless highway. He settled down in a small town not far from where it all happened. He opened a motorcycle repair shop. He became a fixture in the community, the quiet, watchful man who would help anyone in need. He never talked about that night, but he didn't have to. The story became a local legend. The biker and the waitress? He and Miller became unlikely friends. They met for coffee once a month, 2 old warriors from different sides of the tracks, sharing a bond forged in a dark parking lot. When Miller retired, he gave a speech. He told the new recruits about courage and duty, and then he told them the story of a long-haul biker who trusted his gut and did the right thing when everyone else was looking the other way. He told them that sometimes the most important tool a cop has is the willingness to listen to an unlikely witness. One person's choice, one moment of paying attention. Think about the ripple effect of that. It's not a wave, it's a tsunami of change. Lena's life was saved. Her family was spared a lifetime of grief. The predators were taken off the street, preventing untold future sorrow. Lena, in turn, has spent her life helping hundreds of other victims find their strength and their voice. All of that good in the world branches out from a single root, a gut feeling in a roadside diner. We all have that capacity. We all have that instinct. It's a quiet voice, and it's so easy to ignore, to rationalize away. We tell ourselves we're imagining things, that we're overreacting, that it's not our business. But what if it is? What if you are the one person who notices? Think about that. You, watching this right now, might be the one person standing between someone's safety and their worst nightmare. Your courage to speak up, to be an obstacle, to be a witness, it could change everything. Tell us in the comments, have you ever had a gut feeling that turned out to be right? Share your story, because every story shared reminds someone else not to ignore that inner voice. And if you believe that heroes don't always wear capes, that sometimes they wear leather and ride a Harley, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories that remind us of the power we all hold. Because you never know when you'll be the one who just needs to order the pie.